Gaza. With more than 1.7 million people living there, this tiny strip of land is one of the most densely populated areas in the world and one of the worst places to live. It's been called the world's largest open-air prison. Here's why. Gaza has been home to a majority refugee population since 1948, when Israel declared its statehood and forced hundreds of thousands of Palestinians out of their homes. Many fled to the Gaza Strip. For decades, Israel has controlled Gaza by air, land, and sea, regulating what goes in and what goes out. When the Palestinian party Hamas won parliamentary elections in 2006, Israel intensified its siege and collective punishment of the Palestinian people living there. That's because Israel considers Hamas a terrorist organization, even though to some Palestinians, it's a legitimate resistance movement. Israel's blockade of Gaza has been condemned by the UN as a violation of international law. It's cut off Palestinians from the rest of the world and made life in Gaza pretty unbearable. 80% of the population is dependent on aid. It's no surprise then that more than 50% of households lack enough food for their families. Water is also a huge problem, with more than 90% of Gaza's water unsafe for drinking. Water treatment plants need spare parts and fuel, both rare resources to operate. Medicine and doctors are also in short supply, and only those with immediately life-threatening conditions are allowed to travel out of Gaza for healthcare, if they're lucky. It doesn't help that Egypt also keeps a very tight border with Gaza, heavily limiting who comes in and out. Infrastructure has also suffered. Basic items like cement, gravel, and steel are largely banned from entering Gaza. That's because Israel says they could be used to make weapons. So basically, Gaza can't build enough to keep up with its growing population. There are also frequent power outages due to fuel shortages for up to 12 hours a day. And Gaza's economy? It's paralyzed. Israel limits Gaza's exports to only 1 truckload of goods per day. Its unemployment rate is one of the highest in the world at nearly 40%. Israel has also launched several large attacks on Gaza. The thing is, with such a densely populated area, no one is safe. Israel says these operations are in response to the indiscriminate firing of rockets by armed Palestinian groups in Gaza. But many have pointed out that the effects of these attacks are disproportionate. The worst bombardment came during Israel's 3-week-long offensive that began in December 2008 called Operation Cast Lead. More than 1,400 Palestinians were killed and thousands more were wounded. Much of Gaza's infrastructure was destroyed. Then, in November 2012, an 8-day operation killed 133 people. One airstrike alone took out 12 people in one family, including 5 children. And the Israeli bombardments continue to this day. That's a glimpse of life in Gaza. And for a generation of young Palestinians who've never been able to leave, it's all they know. So the next time you see Gaza in the headlines, don't forget what you just heard.